My name is Delaney Rhodes, and for 18 years my family believed I'd walked away. Walked out of the Air Force Academy. Walked out on discipline. Walked out on legacy. In their eyes, I had abandoned the family's proud military tradition and stepped into civilian obscurity. No one ever asked what I did instead, not really. They had already written their story. At every Christmas in Asheville, my younger brother Carter's rising Air Force rank was celebrated like scripture. My parents beamed at him the way they used to beam at my grandfather's framed wings. Meanwhile, I showed up with a pie from a bakery because no one expected more from me. Once, my aunt leaned in, all pity and pearls, and said, "It's so kind of you to still visit, dear." She said that 2 days after I'd returned from a covert mission briefing in Brussels. But to them, I was the dropout with decent table manners. When I turned 30, I stopped hoping they'd see me. By 36, I stopped attending anything at all. Until last month. I went to Carter's ceremony, Air Force Colonel, full honors, not to be polite, to see if I still existed in their world. I wore a muted navy dress and flats, civilian, invisible, or so I thought. Halfway through the event, General Harlan stepped into the hangar. His eyes scanned the rows, then stopped. On me. He paused, stood tall, and saluted. "Ma'am, Senior Strategic Attaché Rhodes, it's an honor." Silence fell. Heads turned. Not for Carter, not for my father, for me. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, where flight was everything and failure wasn't allowed. My father, Dean Rhodes, retired as a brigadier general. My mother, a trauma nurse, raised us with precision and protocol. Dinner talk was all acronyms: NORAD, AWACS, SOF. No birthdays, no softness. I joined the academy at 17, that should have been enough. But in my family, pride came only with publicity, medals, headlines. So when I left without a diploma and no explanation, they assumed the worst. They never asked the truth, because the truth was never theirs to hold. I had been recruited, quietly, off the record, into a joint strategic initiative operating outside the chain of command. No ceremony, no public record, just a signature, a burned ID card, and a disappearance into a program that didn't exist on paper. It was called the Advanced Strategic Intelligence Directive, ASID, civilian title, military gravity. My role was to anticipate risks before they turned kinetic, to architect deterrent structures before world leaders even knew the threat was forming. Every win was silent, every mission deniable. To my family, I was still the dropout in a cardigan somewhere in D.C., probably making reports for mid-level brass. Once, at a 4th of July cookout, I heard my father tell a neighbor, "Carter, boots on the ground in Kandahar. Delaney, well, she's in some office near the Pentagon, makes slides." I was standing 15 feet away, having returned 2 weeks prior from a private security briefing with EUCOM. I'd greenlit a cyber defense pivot that stalled a targeted attack in Vilnius. But that wasn't the kind of pride my family displayed. Theirs was in uniforms, medals, family Facebook albums. Carter, my younger brother, had the kind of career they could frame. Commissioned at 22, deployed, commended, picture perfect. He deserved the praise, but his shine made it easy for them to erase me. Over the years, I mailed gifts. My mother's favorite gardenias, vintage rye for Dad, a 529 plan deposit for Carter's daughter. I never got a thank you. A cousin once slipped up and told me they didn't use my name anymore. "It just upsets your mom," she said. That same cousin sent a family photo once, everyone at the lake house. I had been there, in the original. In the one she sent, I'd been cropped out. To make it symmetrical, she claimed. I kept both copies, not out of pain, but as a timestamp. That was the moment I understood I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been erased. Still, I watched. Quietly. I saw Carter's promotion, heard his keynote at Ramstein. He even used a line I'd written in a classified brief months before. He didn't know I'd hear it. Or maybe he did. I never stopped serving. I just stopped showing up. Until the call came. It was early November. The air in DC had that thin, metallic chill, the kind that cuts through wool and memory. I had just finished a classified session with the Cyber Defense Integration Unit when my phone buzzed. The name lit up like a flare from another life. I stared at it for 4 rings before answering. Her voice came through taut, measured, not cold, just emptied of softness. Carter's being promoted next week, full colonel, ceremonies at Wright-Patterson. You should come. A beat of silence. No, how are you? No, we'd love to see you. Just don't wear anything strange. And please, don't make it about you. I said, I'll be there. Not for closure, not for them. I needed to see something if I could stand in the old house, take up space, and not shrink at the sound of my own name. That night, I opened the storage closet. At the back, wrapped in plastic, was the dark gray uniform they'd never seen. Non-military issue, structured, streamlined, clearance-based. I didn't pack it. Instead, I chose a slate blouse, tailored trousers, and low black heels, civilian enough to be invisible. Let them stare at what they'd chosen not to see. The drive to Dayton was 6 hours of silence and bare trees. No rehearsing, no imagined confrontations, just the hum of the highway. I arrived before dusk. No greeting, porch swept clean, flag precisely hung. I knocked, then let myself in. Mom was at the dining table adjusting place cards. Without glancing up, she said, "Change your shirt. You're sitting next to Carter. And don't distract from tomorrow." No hello, no welcome home, just commands, as if I'd never left. The dining room looked untouched. Same wallpaper, same framed photo of Carter getting his silver bar. Centered, lit just right. Dad appeared next, khakis crisp, hair still regulation short. He nodded. You made it. Not a hug, not a question, just a mark of attendance. The pre-ceremony dinner was tight. Family, 2 of Carter's COs, and a junior officer I barely recognized from a Christmas newsletter. I seated at the edge, next to a neighbor who called me Danielle. I didn't correct her. If you've ever felt invisible in the one place that was supposed to see you, you're not alone. Subscribe to the channel and join me in the next chapter, where the salute that changed everything echoed louder than years of silence. Carter entered like a hometown hero straight from a recruitment poster. His dress blues were flawless, buttons gleaming, ribbons aligned with surgical precision. He moved through the room like a politician at a fundraiser. Handshakes, practiced smiles, charming nods. He was the kind of officer you saw in press releases, polished, photogenic, safe. When he finally reached my end of the table, he gestured vaguely in my direction with 2 fingers curled just enough to be dismissive. "This is my sister Delaney," he said. "She started at the academy, then switched paths. She's in some kind of admin role now, I think, over in DC. A few chuckles slid across the table like spilled water. I caught them in my throat and swallowed. The neighbor next to me leaned in again. "That's still good, though," she offered, a smile too wide. "Better than nothing, right?" I smiled with just my mouth. "Sure," I said, and spooned another bite of custard from its little glass dish. Sweet, generic, designed to please without ever standing out. Dad stood to raise a glass. "To Carter," he said, "to service, discipline, and to sons who finish what they start." Everyone drank. I raised my glass. I didn't sip. Carter tapped his fork against his glass, just loud enough to draw attention, just soft enough to seem humble. "The Air Force," he said, "has taught me many things. Chief among them, that walking away isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender." Laughter, a nod from Dad, an approving pat on the back from an old CO. It wasn't subtle, a dig dressed up as a speech, and it had my name tucked inside like a bullet in an envelope. I stayed quiet. Over the years, silence had become my armor, tailored to fit. After dinner, while the guests lingered near the hallway portraits, I slipped into the den. The walls were lined with framed history portraits. My father in Germany, Carter at his first deployment, even Mom in an old field hospital photo, young and focused. But not a single picture of me, not since 2003. One frame even had space where I remembered standing. I kept the original. They had centered the shot. Removed the ghost. Outside, the wind rustled dry leaves. I stepped onto the porch and let the door fall shut behind me. Soundless. The night air was crisp, dry, coated in the kind of stillness that hums louder than sound. Somewhere behind the tree line, a brass ensemble was rehearsing, notes rising and trailing off like thoughts abandoned mid-sentence. I sat on the top porch step, elbows on knees, watching the streetlights blink on one by one across the quiet Dayton neighborhood. Behind me, laughter spilled through the windows, warm, familiar, exclusive. Tomorrow, I'd take my place. I'd sit still, clap when appropriate, vanish when expected. Let Carter shine. That was the role I'd been assigned long ago. But truth has its own agenda. It doesn't wait for permission or timing. It just walks in and lets the silence do the rest. The auditorium at Wright-Patterson was pristine, regimented in ceremony, flags, brass plaques, rows of chairs labeled with rank and relation. I was seated near the back, between a junior officer's girlfriend and a teenage niece, snapping selfies under the ceremony program. Carter stood at the podium in perfect posture, uniform flawless, voice smooth. His speech was everything it needed to be: patriotism, perseverance, pride. Then came the dagger wrapped in decorum. In this life of service, we learn to honor those who wear the uniform and to remember those who walked away from it. No surprise, the barbs were familiar. I'd worn them like a second skin for years. But just as he turned the next page of his speech, the auditorium doors creaked open. A hush spread like spilled ink. A tall man entered, dark uniform, silver hair, quiet authority in every step. General Nathaniel Merrill. He didn't speak, he just scanned the room, and stopped when his eyes landed on me. His back straightened further, and then he walked towards me. Unhurried, but with intent. Every step, crisp, deliberate. When he reached my row, he paused, then raised a precise salute. "Ma'am, Senior Strategic Attaché Rhodes, an honor to see you again." The room stopped breathing. Carter's voice wavered. My mother dropped her water glass. The shatter echoed like a gunshot. My father began to rise, then slowly sat back down, his jaw tense, expression unreadable. Around me, heads turned. Conversations flared like sparks. Did he say strategic attaché? Wait. That's Delaney? I thought she dropped out after the academy. I stood, not for applause, but to return the respect. "General Merrill," I said evenly, voice clear. "Always a privilege." From the front row, a junior captain leaned toward his commanding officer. "That's the one from the Tallinn protocols," he whispered. I thought she was a ghost story. Carter tried to recover, his mouth still moving, but the rhythm had gone. The gravity in the room had shifted. Gently, irrevocably. For the first time, eyes weren't on him. They were on me. The ceremony ended in scattered applause, confused, polite, the kind people give when they're unsure what they've just witnessed. Outside, families formed little islands of celebration. I stood by the side exit, calm, unnoticed, until Carter appeared. His steps hit the concrete sharp, urgent. "You let me go up there like that?" he snapped under his breath. I met his eyes. "Like what?" "Like a joke," he hissed. "You didn't say anything, you just stood there." I stood still, I said. "You were the one who defined me out loud." His expression shifted. "So that was the plan? Humiliate me? Hijack the moment?" "If your moment only exists in my silence," I said softly, "then maybe it was never really yours." I didn't wait for more. I walked away, unhurried, steady. Behind me I could feel the press of recalibration, people reshuffling what they thought they knew. Let them. They'd spent years erasing me. They could take a minute to redraw the ending. That night, I returned to my quarters on base. Standard issue furniture, buzzing desk lamp, neatly folded towel. On the desk sat a plain manila envelope. No label, no seal, just waiting. Inside, a printed scan of an old email, no sender, time-stamped 2 years earlier. It accused DM Rhodes of approving an off-record operation in Yemen, one allegedly tied to civilian casualties. The phrasing was clinical, too clinical. The language was unmistakable. I'd seen it before, in a classified after-action summary I'd reviewed in Brussels during a JSAP rotation. The wording wasn't just similar, it was exact. That report had passed through 3 sets of hands. One of them had been Carter's. A chill moved through me. At the time the email was sent, I'd been pulled into a discreet internal audit. Nothing stuck. The system flagged it as a false anomaly and moved on. But now, years later, with this paper in hand, I saw the truth. The smoke hadn't cleared. It had just been buried under silence. That evening, I found Carter on the back patio of the officer's lounge, scrolling his phone with one hand, drink in the other. I said nothing at first, just held up the page. His eyes met mine, then dropped to the paper. He froze. Then, silence. Yes, he said finally. I said it. His jaw clenched. He swallowed. Because you weren't supposed to win. I didn't speak. I stayed, he said. I followed every rule. You disappeared, but they still whispered your name. Even when you were gone, you cast a longer shadow. His words weren't bitter, just broken. I nodded slowly. You know, leaking intelligence is a federal crime. I wasn't trying to leak intel, he murmured. Just doubt. I looked at him. My brother. The one who stood in front of cameras while I moved in silence. You planted that doubt in me long ago, I said. But I never let it grow. The next morning, I submitted a formal request to lead the investigation. Unconventional, but I still held JSAP reserve clearance. And I had motive. This breach had my name in its roots. General Merrill approved it without hesitation. Clean it up, he said, and don't pull punches. The task force was lean, myself, 2 JSAP cybersecurity officers, and 3 others I never thought I'd work beside again. My father, my mother, and Carter. Dad reviewed archived comms, his post-retirement clearance still intact. Mom analyzed metadata with surgical precision. Carter was tasked with scanning legacy vulnerability frameworks, a poetic kind of penance. The air was cold, words were few, but the work was real. 3 days in, our AI flagged a dormant Trojan buried in a 2017 logistics archive. The embedded Trojan had never triggered until someone accessed it through a backdoor server. The logs confirmed it. The credentials used belonged to Carter. 2 nights before his promotion ceremony. He hadn't meant to detonate it, but carelessness still has fallout. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. I just wanted to peel back the curtain, he muttered. I didn't know there were landmines behind it. I didn't scold. I didn't smirk. You lit the match, I said quietly. But I'll put out the fire. He nodded, eyes low. That night, I reviewed the final security patch. The breach was contained, but some fractures don't heal with code. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a podium at a regional strategy summit in D.C. No medals, no bars, just a nameplate. Delaney Rhodes, Senior Strategic Attaché, JSAP. My presentation covered asymmetric threat modeling, but I closed with something I'd never spoken aloud. A night in Kirkuk. A choice that saved civilians but cost me recognition. I made that call, I said, because children were inside. And I'd make it again. In the second row, Carter, left full uniform, listened in silence. When I stepped down, I handed him the mic. He cleared his throat. I used to believe visibility was everything, he said. But now I know some of the strongest among us are the ones no one sees coming. That night, we took a new family photo. No edits. No omissions. Later, Carter handed me a simple cake box, chocolate, blue icing. Sister. Leader. Ghost no more. And for the first time in years, I wasn't a visitor in my own story. I carried silence like armor. But your voice can be a bridge. Drop a comment below. Tell me what strength means to you. What would you have done in my place? If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or overlooked, you're not alone. Let's build a space where resilience finally gets seen.